Welcome back to the U.S. Navy History Podcast. I am Dale, and I am joined by DeChristoff.
Hey,
Christoph.
nice to meet you, Dale. Is that what we're doing? The D apostrophes? I'm down. I like that.
This time.
Okay, nice. Well, hello everybody. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad that you're here. All right, so we're going to jump back into WW1, the overview of the overviews. So we should be able to finish the overview this time, I think, and then hopefully, and then jump into zooming in on specific areas, overviews.
I believe in you, Dale. You can do it.
Me too. All right, so you ready to get underway?
Oh, yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. So the war is over.
Yay! Oh, man. That was quite the overview.
No other war has changed the map of Europe so dramatically as this war did. 4 empires disappeared.
Whoa, 4.
The German Empire,
Okay.
the Austro-Hungarian Empire,
All right.
the Ottoman Empire,
Yes.
and the Russian.
That's right.
A lot of other nations regained their former independence, and new ones were created.
Oh, yeah.
4 dynasties, together with their royal families, all fell after the war. They were the Hohenzollerns, the Habsburgs, the Romanovs, and the Ottomans.
Romanovs I knew. That's
Yes.
as immortalized in the animated classic Anastasia. And other works.
Belgium and Serbia were very, very badly damaged, as was France, with about 1.4 million soldiers dead.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's just the dead soldiers.
Not to mention wounded and other civilians at casualties. Ugh, it's awful.
Germany and Russia were also have very high death counts.
Oh, yeah. And Russia, more or less got out early. So.
Okay, so the formal state of the war between both sides persisted for 7 months after 1919 started, which ended with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. Now, the American public were like, we don't like this because of creating the League of Nations.
Well, that was Wilson's brainchild, right? He was pushing for that as part of the treaty.
Yeah, but Americans were like, well, we don't want to be part of this. We are Americans.
Oh, yeah.
The U.S. did not formally end its involvement in the war until the Knox-Porter Resolution was signed in 1921.
Whoa, I did not know that.
After the Treaty of Versailles, the treaties with Austria, Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire were signed. But the negotiation of the latter treaty with the Ottoman Empire was followed by the Turkish War of Independence. And a final peace treaty between the Allied powers and this country that would become the Republic of Turkey was not signed until July 24th, 1923.
Wow. I guess the best time to overthrow an empire is right after they've lost a huge war.
Well, yeah, because then you're like, oh, they don't have the resources.
Right.
We could just come in there and it's mine. They can't defend. and nobody around us are able to put up much of a fight either.
Right. And we're angry because we've had to
So
do
angry.
what they do. Yeah. Ottoman Empire have been pushing people around for centuries. So
Oh yeah.
I could see that.
Let's see. A lot of war memorials date the end of the war as being when the Versailles Treaty was signed in 1919, which was when a lot of troops serving overseas finally started on the way home. But others say that the war's end concentrate on the armistice of November 11th, 1918. But legally, and that's a big difference, legally, the formal peace treaties were not completed until the last one, the Treaty of Lausanne, was signed.
And that was the 1923 one, right?
That was August 23rd, 1923.
Huh. So what are the legal implications of not having the war end until then? Like you could still shoot somebody from a different country and it's like, hey, we're at war.
Well, no, when they signed the Versailles Treaty, it's like, okay, no more fighting. It's mostly just that everything that are in the agreements are up in the air until the last signature is put down,
I see. Okay.
which is one of the reasons why it takes so long to get things started for rebuilding.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense too.
All right, so after the war, the Paris Peace Conference imposed a number of peace treaties on the Central Powers, officially ending the war. The Treaty of Versailles dealt with Germany and building on Wilson's 14th point, which was the League of Nations.
Mhm.
Germany was forced, despite all the protests that they put up, to admit guilt for starting the war.
Yeah, I think that's kind of crappy.
To the winners go the spoils.
Yeah.
Dictate.
I guess
But,
they were the best at killing folks, and
Yeah.
that's probably what rubbed people the wrong way. It's like, oh, yeah, the Germans killed way more than the Austria-Hungarians.
They did kill a lot of people.
Yeah. So,
But because they were forced to take the blame for starting the war, this held them this held them liable for huge reparations.
yeah, which was an enormous mistake. If we go back to the last episode where the Pope was talking about how to settle this, and he mentioned, yeah, no reparations, it was wise because as we can see things unfold between this and the lead up to World War II, this was a huge factor.
Oh yeah, no. It was not forgotten. Lots of people held it in their hearts and were like, we're gonna change this.
Mm-hmm.
So Germany had to acknowledge responsibility for, quote, all the loss and damage to which the Allied and associated governments and their nationals had been subjected as a consequence of the war imposed upon them by the aggression of Germany and her allies.
Yeah, okay. So let's go back to the beginning. A Serbian assassinates an Austro-Hungarian royal. And so tensions escalate, and it was primarily Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia, and then Serbia was allied with Russia, so Russia comes in. And Germany's like third or fourth, because I think they're allied with Austria-Hungary, right?
Germany did the most damage.
But they didn't start it. And so I think it's like you're down relaxing at the bar and your problematic friend gets into a fight again, because that's what he does. And then you're his friend, so you got to jump in. And as it turns out, you're trained in MMA, and so you're able to whoop a few people, as it were. And then you get the biggest charges against you
Mm-hmm.
because you kick the most butt.
Yep.
When you didn't even start the fight. You were pulled into it because your friend
Oh,
was getting jacked.
you're the biggest target. So at the end, everybody points to you.
I guess my analogy was too good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stinks. But I mean, yes, Germany, they were, from the American perspective, they were the bad guys. I get that. Um,
Well, especially because of the U-boats.
oh
That's
yeah,
why Germany was the big bad for the U.S.
that's true. And I guess that's
And
really who the French and the British were fighting almost exclusively.
yes. Yeah. And of course, since the U.S. had the biggest seat at the table,
Hmm.
what the U.S. says goes.
Okay, well, allow me
That's
to submit my formal disagreement with Woodrow Wilson, perhaps the first of many.
okay. Well, go ahead and get your Ouija board out and let them know.
Well, I'll do that. We'll do that in post.
All right. Now, to be fair, there were similar clauses put into the other treaties signed by the other members of the Central Powers. But this clause to the Germans later became known as the War Guilt Clause. As you said, the great majority of Germans felt humiliated and resentful. And it became, again, as you said, a major campaign issue for the Nazi.
Uh-huh.
Overall, the Germans felt that they had been very unjustly dealt with by what they called the Diktat of Versailles. Schultz said that the treaty placed on Germany, quote, under legal sanctions, deprived of military power, economically ruined, and politically humiliated.
Those are three very bad things.
Yes. While nations liberated from German rule viewed the treaty as recognition of wrongs committed against small nations by a much larger aggressive neighbor.
I'm sure Belgium especially felt justified in supporting that.
So the peace conference required all of the defeated countries to pay reparations for all the damage done to civilians. But in practice, this only happened to Germany.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I guess, yeah, the Ottomans were fighting the Turkish Revolution, and the Austro-Hungarians, I don't know. It's like, yes, they're okay. Good, because that I have a lot of questions, and I think you're going to answer them.
So Austria-Hungary was partitioned into several states, which included Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. And this was largely along ethnic lines. Transylvania was shifted from Hungary to Greater Romania. And this was detailed in the Treaty of Saint Germain and the Treaty of Trianon. So because of the Treaty of Trianon, 3.3 million Hungarians went under foreign rule.
Whoa.
Hungarians made up 54% of the population of the pre-war Kingdom of Hungary, and only 32% of its territory was left to Hungary.
So, as you know, I'm an American. Very excited to be so, by the way. And in my lifetime, and even before then, our borders have been pretty static. Like, we haven't really annexed anything or lost anything or changed hands anyhow. And I'm glad about that.
Yes.
What's happening to these Hungarians, I think, is interesting because you're in an empire, or I guess most of the empires, you're in an empire, you're fighting, you're spending resources, the people in the town are sacrificing material goods and the people in it and all this stuff. You lose, and so not only do you have to pay economically all these reparations and everything, but then you're not even part of the nation that you grew up in. It's a new thing all of a sudden, and it's a whole new system of government and ways and conventions and people that are in charge, and that's got to be very difficult to deal with after the trauma of the war. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine it is very traumatizing because all of a sudden you one morning you're Hungarian and the next morning you're Czech.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
It's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, I mean, and that is shown in 1920 and 1924 that's shown between 1920 and 1924 because 354,000 Hungarians fled former Hungarian territories.
Oh, yeah, because I'm sure those territories that were divided upon ethnic lines, like you said, those that were being dominated by the Hungarians probably aren't too crazy about the Hungarians. It's like, oh yeah, you've been pushing us around for a while. So any Hungarians in our territory are going to get the same, and so absolutely they're fleeing. I get that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Prussian Empire uh, lost much of its western frontier as the newly independent nations of Estonia, Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. All these countries were carved from it.
Wow, that's nuts.
Bessaraba was reattached to Greater Romania, as it had been a Romanian territory for more than 1,000 years. The Ottoman Empire disintegrated.
Oh yeah, this is the most interesting to me. The way
Yeah.
it was carved up.
Much of its non-Anatolian territory was awarded to various allied powers as protectorates.
Mm-hmm.
The Turkish core was reorganized as the Republic of Turkey. The Ottoman Empire was partitioned by the Treaty of Sevres of 1920. This treaty was never ratified by the Sultan and was rejected by the Turkish Republican movement, which is what ultimately led up to the Turkish Independence War, which is why the World War I did not legally end until 1923.
I see. So the people that tried to upend the Sultan wanted the treaty, I assume, and the Sultan rejected it, and they're like, let's just please finish this. And so they deposed him and then signed on, I assume. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Poland re-emerged as an independent country after more than a century.
Whoa.
The Kingdom of Serbia and its dynasty as a minor Entine nation and the country with the most casualties per capita became the backbone of a new multinational state, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovens. This was Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia,
I see.
which combined the Kingdom of Bohemia with parts of the Kingdom of Hungary. Russia then became the Soviet Union. The Ottoman Empire was replaced by Turkey and several other countries in the Middle East.
Yeah, all those. Like, this is, I don't know, Iraq and Jordan and Israel, and like that whole area gets randomly carved up by the British Empire. It's like, yeah, we think this should be here and that should be there. And they didn't, unlike what they did with the Austro-Hungarians, they didn't really carve it up along ethnic lines or historical lines. So that's why you see a lot of conflict with the Kurds, for example, with Syria and Iraq.
So in the British Empire, the war unleashed a new forms of nationalism. Of course,
Oh,
why
yeah.
wouldn't it?
You won. You won. Why not?
In Australia and New Zealand, the Battle Gallipoli became known as those nations' baptism of fire. It was the first major war in which the newly established countries fought. And it was one of the first times that Australian troops fought as Australians, not just as subjects of the British Crown.
Interesting.
Anzac Day is what they celebrate for this defining moment.
Nice.
After the Battle of Vimy Ridge, where Canadian divisions fought together for the first time as a single corps, Canadians began to refer to this as their nation, as their Forged from Fire moment. They succeeded on the same battleground where their mother countries had faltered.
Yeah, I don't hear
And
as much about the Canadians. With the exception of Gallipoli, I don't hear much about the Australians either. But I know that they're pretty tenacious fighters, like both sets of folks. And I'm glad you're mentioning them.
uh, this was the first time they were respected internationally for their own accomplishments.
Hmm.
Canada had entered the war as a dominion of the British Empire, and it stayed that way, but it emerged with a greater measure of independence. When Britain declared war in 1914, all their dominions were automatically at war.
Right.
Uh, so at the conclusion, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa were individual signatories in the treaty.
That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. The establishment of the modern state of Israel and the roots of the Israeli-Palestine conflict, as they're
Still going on.
held over. This is partially found in the unstable power dynamics of the Middle East that resulted from WW1.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because prior to this, the Ottoman Empire had maintained a modest level of peace and stability throughout the Middle East. And now that was gone.
Well, it was peace through horrible oppression. Like they were not kind.
No, they weren't kind, but they were able to keep everything together. But now that there's a power vacuum,
Yeah, that's true.
everybody's going for the land saying, this is ours, this is ours, this is ours, this is ours.
Yeah, I think the Kingdom of Jordan gets established here, which I thought was interesting.
So because of the destruction of the Ottoman Empire, and this was pivotal in contributing to the modern political situation in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this war has so many long-lasting effects. It's insane.
Yeah. So let's get into some economic consequences, because these were vast as well.
Oh yeah.
So there were 60 million European soldiers mobilized from 1914 to 1918.
Wow.
8 million were killed. 7 million permanently disabled. 15 million seriously injured.
That's unbelievable.
That's a mind-blowing number.
Yeah.
Germany lost 15.1% of its active male population. Austria-Hungary lost 17.1%. France lost 10.5%. The German civilian deaths were 474,000.
Wow.
A large part of this was food shortages and malnutrition, which allowed diseases to invade and kill.
Right. Yeah, those winters are pretty rough. Like once
Mhm.
winter hit in Germany, like 1916, forget about it. Those civilians were really suffering.
Yeah. By the end of the war, famine had killed approximately 100,000 people in Lebanon.
Wow.
The best estimates of the death toll from the Russian famine of 1921 is between 5 and 10 million.
That's staggering.
Yeah. By 1922, there were between 4.5 and 7 million homeless children in Russia as a result of WW1 and the Civil War,
Yeah.
and of course, the famine. A lot of anti-Soviet Russians fled the country after the revolution, and by the 1930s, the northern Chinese city of Harbin had 100,000 Russians.
Really?
Thousands more immigrated to France, England, and the U.S. of A. Now, over the pond in Australia, the effects on their economy was also quite severe. The Australia Prime Minister, who was
Oof, I don't know. World War One. Oh no, I don't know.
I'd be very surprised if you did. It was Billy Hughes.
Oh no, I have no idea.
He wrote to the British Prime Minister, who was
Winston Churchill.
Lloyd George.
Lloyd George.
No, Winston Churchill lost his prime ministership after. Oh,
No, he wasn't Prime Minister till World War II.
no, he wasn't prime
Yeah,
minister.
yeah. He was
Yeah, Winston
Navy
Churchill-
Secretary.
Yeah, no, Winston Churchill did not get the prime ministership until World War II.
Right. Sorry. Wrong World War.
Yeah. But so Billy wrote, quote, "You have assured us that you cannot get better terms. I much regret it and hope even now that some way may be found of securing agreement for demanding reparation commensurate with tremendous sacrifices made by the British Empire and her allies." Australia received £5.5 million in war reparations. But the direct cost of the war that Australia had suffered was £376.9 million.
Whoa.
Mhm.
That is enormous. And it kind of makes 5 million pounds is like, oh, that's pretty good. And then that's a drop in the bucket. It's not even 1%.
Yeah, it gets even worse.
I guess it is 1%.
By the mid-1930s, reparation pensions, war gratuities, interest and sinking fund charges were £831.2 million.
How devastating. What a waste all the way around. Like this war.
So there was around 416,000 Australians who did serve. About 60,000 were killed, and 152,000 were wounded. So diseases flourished in these abysmal conditions that these guys were fighting in. In 1914 alone, louse-borne epidemic typhus killed 200,000 in Serbia.
Ooh.
Between 1918 and 1922, Russians had about 25 million infections and 3 million deaths from typhus.
Golly, yeah. Sorry. I'm just, this is so bad.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is bad. And then you mentioned something else that makes it even worse. So let me just focus on the Russians for a bit. Not only did they have World War I and then their own revolution, you said it was something to the effect of 8 million homeless children, in the tens of millions of typhus infections, 15 million died from famine. Like, this is devastating. And
we still have the Russian malaria count.
oh my gosh.
Before WW1, there was about 3.5 million cases of malaria.
Uh-huh.
By 1923, 13 million cases.
What the heck? That's
In addition, there was also the flu.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the Spanish flu hits like right in the middle of the war, right?
1918,
Oh.
50 million people dead because of the really badly named Spanish flu.
Where was its origin?
So it was called the Spanish flu because the reporting on it started in Spain. The potential origins have been thought to maybe even be from the U.S., starting in Kansas, actually.
Really?
Mm-hmm. There was a January 1918 outbreak in Kansas, and this might have been the point of origin. There are others that think that a major UK troop staging and hospital camp was the where it started in France. Others are saying that it started in China.
You know what? Who knows? That's I think
Yeah.
one of the issues that you get with a lot of international mixing, whether it's via warfare or regular travel, is it's hard to pinpoint the origin of that kind of stuff. Because even if it
Right.
came from Kansas, there's some guy who put grain on a train, went to a major city, and then that maybe got deployed abroad for helping the British. You know what I mean? So
Put grain on a train to Spain.
there we go. Oh my gosh, it was right there and I missed it. I'm glad
Well,
you're here, Dale.
I had to save you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. The listeners would have been pulling their hairs out, or just like, Christoph, it was right there.
Yes, it was. Lobbying by a guy named Shyam Wizman, he feared that the American Jews would encourage the U.S. to support Germany, ended up being in the British government's Balfour Declaration of 1917. This endorsed the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
A total of more than 1.1 million Jewish soldiers served in the Allied and Central Power forces during the war, which included 275,000 in Austria-Hungary and 450,000 in Russia.
Wow. Yeah, I think this is the only declaration from World War I that carried over through World War II. Like everything else kind of fell apart. I mean, hey, spoiler alert, everything else falls apart.
The social destruction and widespread violence of the Russian Revolution that the Russian Civil War sparked more than 2,000 programs in the former Russian Empire, mostly in Ukraine. And an estimated 60,000 to 200,000 civilian Jews were killed in those atrocities.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to technology.
All right.
Yeah. So when the war began as a clash of 20th century technology and 19th century tactics, which of course led to the huge number of casualties. By the end of 1917, the major armies, now numbering millions, had modernized and were making use of telephone, wireless communication, armored cars, tanks, and aircraft.
Wow.
Infantry formations were reorganized so that 100-man companies were no longer the main unit of maneuvers. Instead, squads of 10 or so men under the command of a junior NCO were favored.
That is a big transformation.
Mm-hmm. Artillery also underwent a revolution. In 1914, cannons were positioned in the front line and fired directly at their targets. By 1917, indirect fire with guns was commonplace, using new techniques for spotting and ranging. Notably, aircraft often overlooked field telephones, communication lines. Counter battery missions became commonplace as well, as sound detection was used to locate enemy batteries.
Nice. Sound detection. That's wild.
Mm-hmm. Germany, of course, was far ahead of the Allies in using heavy indirect fire. They employed 6-inch and 8-inch howitzers in 1914, when the typical French and British guns were only 3 and 4-inchers. The British did have a 6-inch howitzer, but it was so heavy it had to be hauled to the field in pieces and assembled.
That's crazy.
The Germans also fielded Austrian guns, 12 and 17-inchers. They also had inventories of various calibers of mine and warfare.
Mine and warfare.
Mm-hmm. These were large, short-range mortars.
Okay.
Or mine launchers in German, mine and warfare. And of course, they are ideally suited for trench warfare. Mortars go up,
Yep.
and then they come right down into the trench.
Exactly.
As you should know, Much of the combat involved trench warfare. Hundreds died just for a yard of ground. Many of the deadliest battles in history occurred during this conflict, like Ypres, the Marne, Cambrai, the Somme, Verdun, and Gallipoli. The Germans employed the harbor process of nitrogen fixation to provide their forces with a constant supply of gunpowder, even though the British had set up a blockade.
Oh, was that Fritz Haber?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. So just so you know, he kind of killed a lot of people, but saved even more people. And I think he won a Nobel Prize even like in the middle of the war. And a lot of people were very uncomfortable because it's like, hey man, you're killing all of us. Yeah, he pioneered a lot of making ammonia from nitrogen gas, which helps fertilization. So the reason we have nitrogen in our fertilizers now is because of his process. We can feed all these people. But he also pioneered a lot of chemical weapons. Not so good.
No. Artillery was responsible for the largest number of casualties.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, artillery consumed a vast amount of explosives. The large number of head wounds caused by exploding shells and fragmentation forced the combatant nations to develop the modern steel helmet.
Can you imagine going into war with artillery with a cloth cap?
Mm-hmm.
That's...
The French introduced it with the Adrian helmet in 1915, and it was quickly followed by the Brodie helmet worn by the British and U.S. troops.
Nice.
In 1916, the German Stahlhelm was designed.
That's the one with the spike on the top, right? I think it was popularized by many motorcycle gangs.
No, it is not.
Oh, okay.
I think the spike was just decorative for some of them.
Oh, I see.
No, it's just a rounded basic helmet.
Oh,
Steel
okay,
helmet.
okay.
And it's actually still in use today, just improved.
I see. Wow, nice.
Also, as you mentioned earlier, the widespread use of chemical warfare
Oh, God.
was used during this conflict. Gases used included chlorine, mustard gas, and phosgene. But not many casualties resulted from gas warfare. Because very quickly gas masks were issued to everybody.
One of my favorite stories from World War I think it was a Canadian medic that saw some chlorine gas coming their way from a trench. And he told all of his guys to pee on some scarves, get your scarves out, pee on them, and then wrap them around your face. And they did, and they were saved because it filtered out the chlorine gas. And I thought to myself, upon hearing this for the first time, that is a lot of trust you have in your Canadian medic for him to tell you that and for you to do it. I think that's pretty great.
Well, it was either that or not do anything. So it's like, at least this is an idea and could give us a fighting chance.
That's right. It's like, it could be worse.
It just sucks for the one guy who peed earlier.
That's right. I just peed. What do you want? And then you got to get somebody else to pee on it, and then it's weird when it's not your pee, and don't even go there.
So the use of chemical warfare and small-scale strategic bombing were both outlawed by the 1907 Hague Conventions, and both proved to be of limited effectiveness. But, that hugely captured the public imagination. Because, it was not very effective, but people still talk about it like it was the worst thing in the world.
I could see that.
So the most powerful land-based weapons were railway guns, weighing hundreds of tons apiece.
Gosh.
These were nicknamed Big Berthas, even though, of course, the namesake was not a railway gun.
I feel bad for all the ladies named Bertha. I mean, that had to have been a popular name at that time, and it's just like, "Hey, Big Bertha, ha, 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 ha." It's like the Karen of today.
Yeah. Germany developed the Paris gun that they were able to bombard Paris from over 62 miles away.
Whoa.
Thankfully, the shells were pretty light. They only weighed about 210 pounds.
Oh, is that all? Ay, ay, ay. That's a lot.
Now, the Allies did have their own railway guns, but the German ones severely outranged and outclassed them. So the trenches, machine guns, air reconnaissance, barbed wire, and modern military fragmentation shells helped bring the battle lines of World War I to a stop. And the British and the French wanted a solution, and were looking for one with the creation of the tank and mechanized warfare. The first tanks that the British used were during the Battle of the Somme. Here's the thing, though. Mechanical reliability was an issue. But it proved that this was worthwhile.
Oh, yeah.
Within a year, the British had hundreds of tanks on the field. They showed their potential during the Battle of Cambrai. And this broke the Hindenburg line. And then this is when combined arms teams captured 8,000 enemy soldiers and 100 guns.
Wow. Imagine not moving yards for years, and then these things pop on the scene, and they can traverse, like they're so broad and like long, they can go over trenches and just push right through barbed wire, and they're bulletproof, and what a game changer.
That is what they were designed to do. So the French, they introduced the first tanks with the rotating turret, the Renault FT, and this became a decisive tool of victory. The war also saw the introduction of light automatic weapons and submachine guns, like the Lewis gun, the Browning automatic rifle, and the Bergmann MP-18. Another weapon introduced was the flamethrower.
That's terrifying. I don't know how effective they are, but that would scare the pee out of me.
When you put them into a bunker, they're very
Oh, gosh.
The Germans first used these, and then other sides saw it and were like, we need that now. The flamethrower wasn't high in tactical value, but it was powerful, it was demoralizing, and caused terror.
Yeah.
It was also very dangerous to have on you.
Oh, yeah. No, you've got to... I could totally see that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was very heavy, and if it gets hit, it explodes.
Right, and everyone around you. If you're in a squadron of these guys, forget it.
They developed trench railways.
Oh.
They used these to supply enormous quantities of food, water, and ammunition to the large number of soldiers in areas where, conventional transportation systems were no longer there.
Right.
The internal combustion engine and improved traction systems for automobiles and trucks eventually rendered these trench railways obsolete. Oh, right. On the naval side, Germany deployed U-boats after the war begins. This was brand new. Of course, as discussed earlier, they alternated between restricted and unrestricted warfare. And the Kaiserliche Marine employed them to deprive the British of vital supplies. The high death toll that the British merchant sailors were taking from what seemed to be an invulnerable U-boat.
Right.
This led to the development of depth charges in 1916, hydrophones in 1917, blips hunter-killer submarines, forward-throwing anti-submarine weapons, dipping hydrophones, and to extend their operations, the Germans posed supply submarines.
Supply submarines. Whoa.
Let's move on to aviation. So, fixed-wing aircraft were first used militarily by the Italians in Libya
No kidding.
on October 23rd, 1911, during the Italo-Turkish War, and they were used for reconnaissance. It was quickly followed by dropping grenades and aerial photography in 1912. So by 1914, their military utility was very, very obvious. They were initially used for reconnaissance and ground attack. So to counter this and shoot them down, anti-aircraft guns and fighter aircraft were developed. After that, strategic bombers were created, mostly by the Germans of the British, though the Germans also did use Zeppelins as well. Towards the end of the war, aircraft carriers were used for the first time.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Because this is not even 20 years after the flight at Kitty Hawk, like the first flight. And then they went from a powered glider to an aircraft carrier. That's leaps and bounds. That's incredible.
Yep, it started with the HMS Furious launching Sopwith Camels in a raid to destroy the Zeppelin hangars at Tondern in 1918.
Wow. Fun fact, that's the plane that Snoopy flies.
Yeah. Manned observation balloons, high above the trenches, were used as stationary reconnaissance platforms, reporting enemy movement and directing artillery. They commonly had a crew of 2 equipped with parachutes. That way, if there was an air attack, the crew could parachute to safety. At this time, parachutes were actually too heavy to be used by pilots of aircraft.
It's, it takes some.
Yeah, smaller versions were not developed until the end of the war. The British leadership also were against them because they feared that they might promote cowardice.
It could also save your highly trained pilot to come back and fight again. But,
Yeah.
tomato, tomato.
So the balloons were recognized as valuable observation platforms, and so they were very important targets for enemy aircraft. To defend them from air attack, they were heavily protected by anti-aircraft guns and patrolled by friendly aircraft. Now, on the attacking side, there were some unusual weapons that were used, such as air-to-air rockets.
I didn't know rockets were around at this point.
That's why it's unusual.
Yeah, I'll say.
So because of all this, the reconnaissance value of blimps and balloons contributed to the development of air-to-air combat between all types of aircraft. And, of course, to the stalemate in the trenches.
Right.
Because now it's impossible to move a large number of troops without being seen.
Right. And then the wireless communication helps communicate the positions and everything. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Germany conducted air raids on England during 1915-1916 with airships, hoping to British damage morale and cause aircraft to be diverted from the front lines. And this did result in panic, leading to the diversion of several squadrons of fighters from France. All right, so we're not going to finish up.
We were so close.
We still got to get into a war cry.
Oh, yeah. It's good to dedicate more of the episode to that.
Yeah.
Continue.
So what we're going to do is we're going to honor one of our fallen angels, like how we like to do at the end of every episode with the help of HeroCards.e. So today we are going to honor First Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge. His hometown was San Francisco, California, served with the U.S. Army Aeronautical Division, U.S. Signal Corps. His date of sacrifice was September 17th, 1908. He was 26 years old. At the very dawn of mechanized flight, the name Thomas Selfridge is found alongside some of the most famous names in American history. Selfridge graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point, ranking 31st in the class of 1903. Ranking first among those 1903 candidates was future General Douglas MacArthur. After graduating, Selfridge received his Army commission in the field artillery, but his passion was for the emerging field of aeronautics, which the Army was only beginning to explore. January of 1907, young Lieutenant Selfridge volunteered his services to Orville and Wilbur Wright. 4 years earlier, the brothers and their Wright flyer had achieved the first successful controlled, sustained flight of a powered aircraft near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. The Wright brothers turned down Selfridge's offer, preferring only permanent assistance. Later that spring, Selfridge met Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone. Bell was experimenting with powered flight and had established the new Aerial Experiment Association, AEA, inviting Selfridge to be one of the original 5 members. Selfridge designed the association's first airplane, Aerodrome No. 1, later nicknamed Red Wing because of the red silk used on its wings. Bell was so impressed with the eager, intelligent young lieutenant, he asked President Theodore Roosevelt to have Selfridge assigned as a military observer of a flight demonstration being planned. In 1908, Selfridge was assigned to the U.S. Army Signal Corps Aeronautical Division at Fort Myer, Virginia, where he designed and flew dirigibles. Lieutenant Selfridge never had an opportunity to fly his Red Wing, but did pilot Aerodrome No. 2, nicknamed White Wing. Designed by AEA colleague Thomas Baldwin. Selfridge became the first U.S. military officer to fly solo in a powered flying machine. In September of 1908, Orville Wright was preparing to demonstrate his flying machine to Army officials at Fort Myer. The Wright brothers had signed a contract with the U.S. government to set out to prove that their new plane could hold 2 people flying at 40 miles per hour and remain in the air for 125 miles. A fellow officer convinced Selfridge to be Orville Wright's passenger in the demonstration, though Wright suspected that Selfridge was acting beyond his Army observation responsibilities and was working secretly to gather information as a competitor. For the demonstration flight on September 17, 1908, the craft was outfitted with an elongated propeller that had not been previously tested. Vibration caused the propeller to strike a guide wire and tear it from the rudder. The propeller broke and the aircraft crashed to the ground from a height of around 100 feet. Orville Wright broke several ribs and suffered a broken leg, but recovered after being hospitalized for months. Selfridge, however, fractured his skull and died later that evening. History records that Lieutenant Thomas E. Selfridge had the distinction of being the first military officer to pilot a motorized airplane. He also had the tragic distinction of being the first person killed in a powered aircraft accident. The fatal crash occurred just 50 yards from the west gate of Arlington National Cemetery, where Selfridge was buried with full military honors a week later. Section 3, Lot 2158. So, First Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge, we thank you.
Thank you.
All right, XO, take us out.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Hopefully you learned something. I know I did. This is a very interesting conflict with a lot of long-lasting repercussions. If you have any comments or questions, or you want to fill us in on some part you particularly enjoyed or something, please let us know. There's a couple of ways you can get a hold of us. Primarily, you can email us. Email address is usnavyhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on x.com or twitter.com. I think they both go to the same place. And X-Twitter. And our handle there is USN History Pod. Just shout us out. Say something. We'll respond back. And then there's also links to the Discord that we have in the show notes. So if you'd like to join the Discord and have a more interactive chat, we're here, along with other listeners. Also, don't forget to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast playing platform. Ooh, that's an alliteration. And let us know what you think. Give us let's say 5 stars. And let's say you want to tell people how great Dale is. I mean, that'll get them intrigued and get them listening, and then they'll find out, wait, this guy's trying to pull a fast one. Anyway, I know. No. You're not. You're greatest. See, you're not just great. You're the greatest. See, I'm trying to
Butter me.
differentiating the
just trying
difference.
not
There's
to get
different
punished.
levels. It's not about punishment. It's about reality, Dale. Anyway, yes, please let us know. And then if there's any fun World War I stuff you want to bring up, bring it on. For example, I have an atlas from the middle of World War I, and it's like, hey, send in this coupon for 5 cents, and when the war's over and the new boundaries are drawn, we'll send you a new atlas. I haven't done it though, so I'll let you know how that goes.
That's expired.
It may be. Oh yeah, I think it's until like 6 months after the peace treaties have been signed. It's been a minute.
Yeah.
Oh well. Right. Well, so thanks, and keep listening.
All right. With that, guys, we're gonna wish you fair winds of following seas. Goodbye.